First aid, how does it work? I know most people think first aid does nothing, and I agree. You do not gain any immediate visible benefits from leveling the first aid skill. In fact, almost every single factor of the skill is invisible to the player, and even in debug mode it's quite obtuse. While you can do every single first aid operation with level 0 first aid, leveling it does make a difference. Before I tell you what it does, I'll have to explain how some parts of first aid work. Every bandage type has a bandage life number. As you can see from the wiki, some are better than others. When you use a bandage, the bandage life number counts down, and when it runs out, the bandage becomes dirty. Similarly, if you put a poultice on a wound, it has a factor number that also counts down. As far as I can tell for poultices, the number counting down is a duration of the effect, not how strong the effect is. On the other hand, when you splint a broken bone, it has a factor number that doesn't change and is clearly meant to be the magnitude that it speeds up healing a broken bone. How does leveling your first aid skill change this? Going from level 0 first aid to level 10 about doubles bandage life and the poultice factor. To say that in a different way, it makes the things you do for first aid last longer, meaning you will not have to care for a wound as often. The wound itself doesn't heal faster due to the first aid skill level though. Is it possible to speed up healing? There's two ways, but they speed up different things. The first way is to eat food. When you have a well-fed or higher moodle, it increases the speed that your overall health and limb health heals. This is important because being sick, infected, and bleeding all reduces your overall health, and if it hits 0, you die. You may have noticed that aside from serious bleeding, you almost always have to stack multiple ways to damage your health before you will outright die. Well, unless you poison yourself, which there is another answer to. The second way to speed up healing is by using poultices. A plantain poultice speeds up general wound healing. How do you make a poultice? You need the herbalism trait or to read the herbalist magazine in-game. From there you can forage for medicinal herbs. Once you have 5 of the required herb, you can then use it with a mortar and pestle to make the poultice. You can make a mortar and pestle with a plank and a saw. Yeah, I think that's a weird recipe too. Next, I'll cover how to deal with each wound type and head into the conclusion. All wounds can become infected. You deal with this by disinfecting them. There's another factor to the way wounds work that can be quite misleading. Wounds have a bleed time and a wound time. These numbers are fuzzy. For example, some scratches have 18 wound time and some have 20 wound time. Both of these count down, and when they end, that effect stops. Scratches and lacerations are treated with bandages. A bad scratch will last nearly as long as a light laceration. The main difference is that lacerations bleed more and longer. Deep wounds. You get these from glass and bullets. First, you need to get the source out, preferably with tweezers instead of barehanded. These wounds bleed a lot. Without stitches, your bandages will last a very short amount of time before getting dirty. You either need a suture needle or a needle and thread to stitch the wound up. Suture needles are a single-use item, then you can put bandages on top of that. In debug mode, stitches count up until the name says good. Without debug mode, you have no idea until you eventually decide to take the stitches out, and it's either a scratch or still a deep wound. This is not good design. All I can tell you to do is to wait a day. Broken bones, splint them. Without a splint, that limb's health will drop to 0, which doesn't mean much overall. But the splint greatly speeds up the healing rate as well as stopping the limb health from dropping. If it's something you can't splint, like your skull, all you can do is bandage it. Burns. Burns are another wound that is very vague. You bandage these up, and every once in a while you will have to clean the burn with a rip sheet. However, you have no idea when it needs to be cleaned until you take the bandage off and then right-click the wound. Yay for nearly invisible mechanics. Now for that conclusion. First aid isn't really a skill like the others, rather it's a group of medical actions that were gathered up and given a potential bonus. The first aid skill itself has no requirements and is one of the skills where the higher you get it, the less you need it, meaning it grows slower and slower. And due to the random spread of numbers, almost impossible for someone to figure out what it even does without digging through the debug mode or even into the game's data. I still don't know what sterilizing bandages does. I assume it reduces the chance of infections, because even the debug mode is so obtuse about what does what, and things are named inconsistently, there's a doubt in the back of my head that made me avoid talking about it. That's all for today. I wish you good luck with your Zomboid adventures.